Howdy folks, welcome back to the Outpost. In today's video we are going to attempt to take a 55-gallon metal barrel and convert it into a camp stove to accommodate down the road our cedar smoke shack. Alright, so this is what we're working with today. About a year ago I went out and bought two 55-gallon metal barrels and stuff like that. They were both white, the other one's on the other part of the property and stuff, but this one I had to season, and when I say season, I bought it and it had food grade liner on the inside of it, and we had to burn it off. So I've had a few barrel fires over the past year and stuff like that. It's still solid, it's in good shape. Let me show you the rest. So about a year ago when I got two of these barrels and stuff, I had designated one of them to make into eventually a camp burn stove and stuff for my smoker. I took the retention ring off as well as the lid, and I made sure all that food grade garbage was burned out of there. It's very toxic and all that stuff. It's like a rubberized coating. Let's move over to the porch and I'll show you the hardware I've picked out in order for us to make this camp stove. Now there's a lot of videos on YouTube of guys just like me doing the exact same thing, but they fail to mention the importance of seasoning your 55-gallon barrel. What does that mean? In my case, I bought food grade barrels, which means in the inside of those barrels was lined with food grade liner, which is a gummy substance and stuff to, you know, be able to transport food grade material. Now, you don't have to do this if you're going to end up setting this up to make it so it's a heating stove. But in our case, we are building something as an implement to create smoke for our cedar smoke shack. That's the reason to season the barrel. There, what you see here is the camp stove kit made by United States Stove Company, or usstove.com. It's all cast iron construction. It fits 55-gallon drums. Let's take a look at the hardware and see what we're working with. All right, so here's what we're working with. We've got a door. We've also got a flue with a flange collar, a bag of hardware, as well as two support legs. Here is kind of what we want it to end up looking like. So the very first thing we're going to do on this camp stove build is we're going to install the legs. All right, first of all, let's take a quick look at these legs. They are cast iron. They're not really heavy, but there's two sides to it. See, this has got kind of a ridge to it, and this other side is just flat and everything. Figure out which end of the barrel we're going to put our door on, and you want these ridges to face towards the door. Let me show you how these set on the barrel. Here we go. You can see on these legs that the parts that are supposed to attach to the barrel itself have two holes in them, and then you got a couple divots up here where the actual foot itself is going to be. You might want to take a measurement from the front to there, from front to there, and get them so they're kind of lined up exactly where they need to be. Then we have to mark where we need to draw our holes to install our hardware. Now I found out the best way of drilling holes where you need to mount this hardware and stuff like that is not with a regular drill and a bit. You're going to burn the bit out, you're going to burn the battery out, is get yourself an impact with a large self-tapping sheet metal screw and drive it in. Now all the hardware that comes with this kit are just these screws as well as these nuts, okay? So that's the size hole that we drilled. Let's go ahead and put our first leg on. All right, now we got our holes kind of drilled out and our leg, our first leg where we want it to be. We're gonna take a screw down each one of those four holes. Now we're going to put some nuts down on the bottom and get that tightened down. Y'all still with me? Great. All right, so the next phase of the camp stove smoker is us installing the door. Now this thing is heavy. It's got a little latch, keep it closed and stuff like that. This is heavy duty cast iron right here. That's where you're going to open up, put your logs in there and all that other good stuff. Not to mention a little damper, almost like a charcoal grill, where it opens and closes to allow airflow to regulate the temperature and all that good stuff. But this is going to require a little bit more effort. Let me show you. All right, so we've taken our camp smoker and we flipped this barrel upside down on the end that doesn't have the lid, and we put the stove door up here. We're going to have to mark out with a marker the holes, which we're going to have to drill out to put our mounting screws, open the door up and trace around the inside of that door, take this thing off and use an angle grinder or a jigsaw and cut that square opening. Wish me luck. Now, before we start cutting out the opening of our door to our camp stove smoker, I highly recommend wearing safety glasses and protective gloves. There you go. Not horrible. It'll do the job and stuff. We're going to set this barrel back up on the blocks. I put the tarp down inside there. We're going to end up having to back the screws onto the mount when it comes to installing this door from inside. It's going to be a little tricky because this thing's heavy and I got to get some screws up in here. So wish me luck. Now that we've got the door kind of stationary for the time being, I don't have to crawl back up in there. Instead, I've got the door open and I can reach through here and I can apply the nut to that bolt. So that way when I use my impact, it'll all suck itself in there right where it needs to be. Oh yeah, there we go. We're getting there. Look at that. Door. Whoo, oh boy. This is gonna be nice. All right, time out. Let's go back for a second. Something I learned the hard way and I had to take this whole thing back out. When we had this thing up on its end and I was cutting out the area to put the door in, I totally didn't count for this little vent area down here, okay? Because if it isn't cut out, it's not pulling air in there. So I had to take and pull all this back out of there, lift it back up, and cut out a notch in order for us to have airflow to go through for the fire to continue. So don't forget that step. All I did is just cut out a little slot down there enough, and now we have the vent sitting there that'll do its job. Shame on me. All right, so the last piece of the puzzle when it came to the kit that I bought for the stove is going to be the dampener flange. See that? Yes, it's where your stovepipe is going to attach and stuff. So we've got to set this on the very top where we're going to have our stovepipe coming out of there and feeding into the smoker eventually. So let's go ahead and install this. Now this is going to be the tricky part when it comes to things, okay? Our damper for our stovepipe and stuff like that, I already drilled out my holes, but the problem is there's no way of tracing the inside of this because of the damper, unless you want to get involved with trying to take that pin out and stuff. So mind you this, when you're working with this and getting to this point, this thing accommodates a 6-inch flue pipe. All right, so I've got one here. We're going to center it down right in the middle of where I already drilled my screws, my holes for my bolts and stuff, and we're going to trace around that. All right, we got to get the back on here. This is even trickier. This is tricky. Last but not least, let's not forget about our 6-inch flue pipe or stovepipe. Set that baby in there like that. And it's going to go right into the side of our cedar smoke shack, which we have not drilled the hole out for. That'll be another video when we test some homemade sausage. We still have it, so the damper will open the check. Let's take a step back and have a look. Ow, she's a beauty. Look at that. Throw a little stove right there and all that stuff. Shovel our wood in there. We have not connected the flue pipe. That'll be in another video. We'll have to drill a hole out through the smoke shack and stuff like that. This thing is awesome, and I'll tell you what, you wish you were here. The nice features and stuff this thing has. Open this thing up. You can shovel your wood in here. You got your little air vent. It's almost like a charcoal grill. Nice. Not to mention the dampener. Oh, this thing, as the air flows in through the door and stuff, that's your air intake. This is your exhaust, so you can control the amount of smoke, the heat of the fire, all that stuff, or you can just load this thing up and you can smoke your food probably up to 8 to 10 hours. Brilliant. Not to mention, this ring and this lid will come off on the back side, and that's our back entryway to getting in here to clean all the ashes and all the other stuff out of here and service it without touching any of the hardware whatsoever. Well, let's wrap this one up. Well, hey, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks so much for hanging out and watching the construction of a camp stove smoker for my cedar smoke shack that we have right here. It's a brilliant idea. We have the ability to load up wood and to regulate the flow to the air dampeners that are in the front, as well as on the smokestack and all that other good stuff. And this allows me to be able to make some homemade sausage or venison, deer meat, or whatever I want to do and hang it inside that smoke shack and be able to smoke it regularly. Now, it is not recommended to be using one of these in your home. I myself personally am going to make a second one of these sometime later this year when I'm going to start building a shop that I'm going to work out of, just heat myself in the wintertime. Got any comments, questions, leave them down below. Until next time, I'll see y'all on the Outpost.